everyone. Welcome back. It's Andy, and today I am asking the question, what is or what makes a supervillain? I suppose the obvious answer is that a supervillain is a villain that has superpowers, is able to do things that a normal human cannot do, or a normal human bad guy or bad girl cannot do. And so this ability makes them super in some way in terms of carrying out their heinous acts. A normal villain, for example, would go and beat someone up on the streets and mug them. A supervillain would go and do the same thing, but instead of using their hands, they can use the power of telekinesis to smash them against the wall and take their wallet. So yeah, so villain, supervillain. I think the comparison and the differences between the two are pretty self evident. However, the thing in comic books which I find is that the fear that's generated by a supervillain as compared to the fear generated by a street level villain for ordinary people seems to be far less. So an example would be that if you take someone like I don't know, Lex Luthor from the DC supervillain, you know, community. He's so busy in trying to get rid of Superman and build his empire that the average person on the street he doesn't even pay much attention to. Chances are that the average Joe who's going to and from work, looking after his family, going to get some milk from down the street, is not going to have any interaction at all with someone like Lex Luthor, or even someone like Sinestro, who is the arch nemesis of many a Green Lantern and is out there somewhere, spanning the galaxy trying to find new things to conquer. So someone like Sinestro isn't going to have any run-ins with regular Joe down the street. Um, and so you have to wonder that you have a supervillain that has very little impact on the average person in their everyday lives. So whether they're super or whether they're normal, what difference does it make? How does that super really affect a normal person? And so, to a normal person, how super villainish are they? I mean, there's no interaction. There's no direct link between anything that the supervillain does that has any impact on the normal average Joe. So what's the point, right? Surely a supervillain should be a character that instills more fear, more loathing, more dread in the hearts of everyday people. I suppose one example where that is applicable is something like Doomsday. When Doomsday was introduced into the DC universe, he went around killing everyone. He didn't discriminate, right? He's just the ultimate killing machine. He kills superheroes, he kills normal people on the street, and he's this unstoppable force that basically kills Superman. He's a dimension, not, he's a space hopping, unkillable killer who eventually gets put down by Superman. Fair enough, but the point is that that is someone that you would fear, because if he gets loose, there's this mindless beast of rage, then he's going to come after everyone. So fair enough. That, I think, to me is an actual supervillain. But those kind of characters are actually quite rare. I think most of the time, most villains with superpowers, hence supervillains, are too preoccupied with taking on superheroes or trying to take over the world. Things on a grander scale, which perhaps are cosmic in terms of how big these ideas are, how big their plans are. They don't normally involve normal everyday people. Their actions don't impact normal everyday people. And the majority of people in any comics universe are normal everyday people, which is why the superheroes and the supervillains stick out. This is why they stand out. Take, for example, the acts of vengeance which took place in the Marvel comics in the 90s, when Loki basically went about enlisting the help of various supervillains to take on Thor and the Avengers and other heroes who he wasn't very happy with. And the way that he did this was by pitting supervillains against superheroes whom they normally wouldn't engage. Even in that story, the average person on the street, living on a farm, living in a flat somewhere in New York City, wherever, they were not impacted by all these acts of vengeance that Loki was perpetrating. These were grand designs on very large scale. It had direct impact on the superheroes, yes, fair enough, but not on the public, unless the members of the public were caught out as collateral damage in a battle taking place in the city. You know, a building gets blown up and debris is falling around and someone's car gets squashed or whatever. The point is that the average Joe can sleep well at night knowing full well that they are, well, they don't even register in the minds of these super villains. And so, as long as they stay out of the way, these super villains won't come after them specifically. They are not the hunted party in question. And as far as superheroes are concerned, well, you know, superheroes can look after themselves. So the threat, despite the superpowers that these supervillains have, the threat at large really isn't that big, which is crazy, right? It's a crazy idea. But to me, that makes sense. I'm not sure if anyone listening into this is agreeing with me. I hope someone is. But I've always thought about that. I've always thought about this fact that we think that these supervillains are going to have a major impact on a lot of people's lives, but they actually don't. Even in the comic books, they don't. Everything is very, very well. It's on a large scale. Everything's on a large scale, and the average person does not operate on a large scale, and so isn't affected by it. But what if there was a person who was so feared by the average individual um, that basically the very thought of him filled your heart with dread? What if there was a character that genuinely affected the everyday Joe or Jane? That when you come across this character, if you were to come across this character in an everyday setting in the street somewhere, in a city, your life would be affected to such an extent that it would either never be the same or you would lose it. Is that not more of a supervillain? Especially if this villain who affects you in such a terrible way, who fills your heart with dread, especially if this villain has a superpower, or even if they have apparatus that they use to create this sense of superpower, isn't that the true definition of a super villain? Because not only are they just villains, they're so horrendous in what they do, they're so evil that they're basically super in their villainy. For me, that is the definition of a true supervillain. Someone who is super at what they do, and what they do isn't very nice. I think the epitome of this characterization of a supervillain is found in the character of Cornelius Stirk, which is a character found in the pages of Batman in DC Comics. And good old Cornelius was introduced in issue 592 of Detective Comics back in November 1988, so a little while ago. And Cornelius is the brainchild of Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle, both comic creators who I respect greatly. I think they've done a tremendous service to the comic book industry. Alan Grant is a fantastic writer, of course, and Norm Breyfogle, I think, was one of the greatest Batman artists ever to ever come into the comic books medium. I think what he did with Batman is I could do a whole like 10-hour rant about how Norm Breyfogle beats competition out of the water. He's fantastic, and a full dedication to Norm Breyfogle. But anyway, that's for a different day. Yes, Cornelius Stirk, I think, is one of those rare characters where if you really study the psyche and the power that he has, it really would fill you with fear if you were to ever actually meet this person on the street. Now, for those of you who want to know what his actual power is, Cornelius Stirk has the ability to make you see him exactly how he wants you to see him. So that could be as your ex-wife, as your dad, as a child, as your next door neighbor, maybe a monster from a horror movie. Whatever it is, whatever he thinks of, he can make you see him as that. Now, whether that's through a form of hypnosis or some form of telepathy, I think that's still kept a bit of a mystery in the comic books. It's not been fully explained. It could be one or the other. But regardless, he does have this ability, which makes him a very formidable foe for Batman or any other superhero that he may come into contact with. And it makes him an absolute death sentence for the normal person on the street whom he manages to take a fancy to. So imagine yourself walking on the streets. You come across your next door neighbor who says, "Hey, come with me. Let me show you something." You're thinking, yeah, the next door neighbor happens to be a biddy old lady. Maybe she needs some help. You walk into a place, you're looking around because they ask you to. Suddenly you get injected, you get knocked out. You wake up tied to a chair, and you find out that the biddy old lady who is your neighbor isn't actually your neighbor at all. It's Cornelius Stirk, because Cornelius reveals himself to you after he's got you incapacitated, tied up to a chair or whatever. There's not much you can do. Now that's a frightening notion. And it only gets worse. If that's even possible, it only gets worse because once Cornelius has taken off his psychic visage and shown you his true face, which is pretty scary, he informs you of his intention. And what his true intention with you is that he's going to kill you and eat your heart. Because in Cornelius's mind, the only way that he can survive is by eating the heart of his victims. Now that's, to me, super villainy. That's taking villainy to a whole new extent. And then, of course, he goes ahead with the action. He at the height of your fear, when the toxins are running through your heart, the nutrients, apparently, according to Cornelius, that those are the nutrients he needs, your fear. He rips out your heart, boils it, and then eats it. Now, here's the thing, you see, you wouldn't have Lex Luthor or Magneto or Doctor Doom or Darkseid for that matter. You wouldn't have these characters, or at least I'm not aware of any instance where these characters have carried out these particular types of acts. And that's the whole point. As I was saying before, the average person on the street, which makes up the majority of the population in any reality, whether it's comic book reality or our current reality, they are not going to be affected by these Magnetos and Doctor Dooms and Lex Luthor. But this guy, Cornelius Stirk, can affect them. In fact, a character like Cornelius Stirk, who's basically just a normal guy with this particular power, he doesn't have any grand schemes or grand designs to take over the world. He's not a cosmic conqueror. He's just some guy who likes to eat people's hearts. And that's what makes him so scary. There's no there's no particular pick or choice. He'll just find the easiest victim, grab them just to fill his own belly with your fear toxins. Scary stuff. So I suppose in the end, it could all come down to the question of whether supervillainy or being a supervillain is judged by the amount of superpowers that you have, or the or perhaps the amount of people that you've killed and eaten, the amount of people who are genuinely touched by your acts of villainy, the amount of people who are genuinely terrified of what it is that you can do. And if that's the case, if that is if the true measure of a supervillain is how scary they are, or how what's the word I'm looking for? how relatable or pertinent they are in the lives of the average person, then I suppose a character like Cornelius Stirk, or a character like Scarecrow, or a character like I don't know, is the Penguin a scary character? I mean, I never found the Penguin to be a scary character. Bullseye from Marvel, a guy who could kill you by throwing a peanut at your head. These almost normal type of characters, these normal type of villains. Of course, Cornelius Stirk does have that power of telepathy, but he's an average Joe otherwise, apart from his hideous looks. These type of characters, I would say, are more super because they impact the lives of ordinary people to a far greater extent. And so I suppose, really, it seems to be the case that supervillains like Doctor Doom, again, Doctor Doom or Magneto, or, let's think of another supervillain. Usually they're floating around in the back of my head, but when you need to mention one, they all disappear. Anyway, Bizarro. There you go. Bizarro is another. I mean, Bizarro is a supervillain, but you feel more sorry for him than anything else, even though he's as powerful as Superman almost. But still, you don't imagine him going around and doing the things that a character like Stirk does. Or, the Juggernaut. Who would you be more afraid of if you were to meet them, encounter them on a dark night in an alleyway? Cornelius Stirk or the Juggernaut? The Scarecrow or the Juggernaut? Joker or the Juggernaut? And we're seeing a pattern here, right? The pattern is that these characters, compared to these superpowered Juggernaut type characters, are nothing. They're insignificant, inconsequential. But to the average person on the street, these people are death itself. Whilst these super powered, super powerful supervillains who don't even notice you, they don't even think about the average person, they are actually more benign in terms of the effect that they have on people. So it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea, an idea that I've had in my mind for quite some time, and I thought I'd share with you guys. And listen, if you disagree, like I always say, if you disagree, that's good. Let me know where you think I've got that wrong. Maybe my whole perception about this is skewed up. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. And as ever, like and subscribe if you will, and comment if you like. I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, be safe and take it easy. Bye bye.